The cloud is really changing both the expectations of your customers, but also the expectation of your own way that you develop. There's some really interesting transitions that we're facing right now in development. The first of those is that we've come a long way, and let's take a brief look at history. On the far left of this slide, you're going to see a whole list of different things that, if you've been around a while, you'll be familiar with. Things like distributed development, monolithic, client server, and now newer things like microservices, containers, even serverless. And I love those, but I want to focus on this slide briefly on the evolution at a more bulky scale. If you look, we used to develop on physical hardware. And if you wanted to do a startup or something for a company, you had to go out and buy a lot of physical hardware. And then after a while, we realized that hardware wasn't being leveraged the way it could have been. And we had pieces of hardware sitting around running at only 2% utilization. So instead, what we've done is we started to virtualize. And there are some brilliant virtualization solutions. And that allowed us to get better utilization out of a single piece of hardware. Because we could take that hardware and then stack several components onto it that all ran independently of one another. But that still didn't solve our scalability issues. You still had to buy enough hardware in order to handle peak load plus 20% as a rule of thumb. Enter the cloud. We were able to take those virtual machines and simply throw them up into a cloud. And when we needed one VM, we got one VM. When we needed 1,000 VMs, we had 1,000 VMs. We had that burst and that capability of moving up and down. And each of these steps created really a ground shift inside of IT with how they were able to effectively serve up the applications that developers were building. But this next transition's a bigger step because we're moving to born in the cloud. We're not taking these ideas from on-premises and bringing them to the cloud. Instead, we're taking brand new ideas, brand new ways of delivering software, and delivering them in very interesting patterns. And that's what this course is about. So we'll be talking about this born in the cloud and how we can leverage things like platform as a service to get there.
So let's talk about the balance of responsibility as you move over to cloud development. And so this slide just shows some of the key points that you would have to be in charge of running infrastructure on your own. So things like networking and storage and servers. If you're managing all of that, you're spending time managing that infrastructure rather than spending time developing solutions for your business. And so a lot of the customers we work with, they say to us, we're not in the business of developing software for other people to use. We're developing software for our businesses to use. So they don't want to be reinventing plumbing. They don't want to be spending time configuring servers and storage and so on. And so moving to the cloud allows them to shift their focus away from the underlying physical structures or virtual machines or tin and move up to the actual development and the business solution. And you'll see we've got a couple of categories there like move-in ready, some assembly required, or build from the ground up. And this has been very real for us. We recently moved from South Africa to Seattle and we had to get some furniture. And so this would be the some assembly required kind of state where we got a flat box from IKEA and we had to assemble this dining room table, and we are able to specify whether it's 6 people or 8 people that can sit at this table. So there's some assembly required and we get to configure it according to our living space. And so this is kind of where the world of PaaS comes in, where we're using some components that other people have built, but we're able to configure it according to our needs, right? So that kind of fits in the middle ground. The move-in ready is the software as a service, and this is kind of like buying a television, right? You buy the television, you don't assemble anything, you just put it up, turn it on, and you don't have any control over the content really. You may want to switch the channels, but you're not building anything to receive signals and display it. The TV does that already. And so software as a service is like that, where you're buying ready-made software that you can apply directly into your business or into your organization. And then on the other end of the spectrum, build from the ground up, this would be our traditional computing where we're actually buying servers, we're putting them into physical spaces, we're doing the networking, and we're making sure that those machines are up and running. So that's really built from the ground up. Now, depending on where you are, you're going to have those various levels of responsibility for what you're taking care of. And the exciting thing about the cloud is that it, like I've mentioned, moves you away from the plumbing side of things and into the space of actually doing business problems, solving business problems rather than solving infrastructure and plumbing problems.
What's really interesting, I think, is that when we start to look at this breadth, there's the elimination of plumbing is such a neat part about getting this way high productivity that we'll be talking about in a moment. So this particular course is going to focus on the PaaS aspect. That's where we want to be because we're building and delivering unique services, so we'll stick in the PaaS area. I love the introduction to SaaS because SaaS is something like Office 365, right? You need email, but that should not be a core competency of you inside your organization. So we're going to stick predominantly with PaaS, although we'll bleed to IaaS on a few of the discussions.
Right.
Let's take a look at the breadth of Azure. You've got your app, and your app can leverage all of the Azure services. And I think this is one of the most interesting components of Azure is this Lego brick-like construction of very powerful applications where you're not writing all of the various services, you're leveraging things that have already been built for you. There's 60 plus odd services with major functionality being released. Well, in 2016, on average, a major piece of functionality and a major feature being released every 7 hours on average. There's a lot of stuff growing in Azure. And these components then are broken up into many little areas as well that are very powerful and that you can run with. And this is just an eye chart to see what some of those look like. I want to wrap with this, taking a look from infrastructure to innovation. And Colin, I'm going to come back to your discussion where you really talked about IaaS, on-premises, moving to IaaS, then moving to PaaS, and finally consuming SaaS. And you'll see these efficiency gains. As we move over time, as an industry, we were on-premises. Everything was local. And then as we moved out into the cloud, we had some massive efficiency gains. But those efficiency gains are leveling out now as we're moving to the cloud. We can burst our infrastructure up and down. We can do all of these things. We're starting to max out some of that efficiency. And so where the business value is coming from now is this rapid innovation that we can innovate the business value we're delivering quickly, get it to market, get feedback, use that feedback to build more innovative platforms and shoot forward. And that's where I'm so excited about the cloud and the opportunity in particularly for these platform as a services that we can